I was holding his phone because he'd asked me to. We were walking up the brick steps toward the riverfront venue when Grant patted his pockets, frowned, and said, "Can you grab it from the car? I left it charging." The night was warm, the kind of Savannah evening that makes everyone linger, and I didn't think twice. I unlocked the door, unplugged the phone, and felt it buzz in my hand before I even closed the car. A banner notification slid across the screen. Not a name. A heart emoji and 3 dots. Muted thread. I stopped walking. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't curious. I was annoyed. He'd been distracted all evening, scanning the room like he was waiting for someone, checking his watch, touching his jacket pocket where his phone usually lived. The notification disappeared, then popped again. Same thread. Same emoji. I tapped it without thinking, because I trusted my marriage enough not to be afraid of a phone. The messages loaded fast. Faster than my brain could catch up. Dates, times, photos that didn't need faces to be understood. A screenshot of a hotel confirmation with a note underneath. Timing matters. She can't know until after the paperwork. Paperwork. I scrolled. My thumb shook, but it didn't stop. There were voice notes I didn't play because the words on the screen were enough. Jokes about how calm I was. A line that landed like a slap. She'll never see it coming. I locked the phone and stood there with the river air pressing against my chest. Somewhere behind me, laughter floated from the entrance. Glasses clinked. This was a benefit night. Polished people, clean smiles, the kind of event where reputations were currency and everyone knew everyone. Grant had insisted we come. He said it would look bad if we didn't. I walked back inside with the phone in my hand. He was near the bar, relaxed now, smiling like a man who believed the night belonged to him. When he saw me, he reached for the phone without looking at my face. I didn't give it to him. "Who is she?" I asked. He blinked once, just once. Not confusion, calculation. "Kira," he said quietly, like he was soothing a situation. "This isn't the place." I held the phone up between us. "You muted her. That's not accidental." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "We'll talk at home." A woman stepped closer to the bar, ordering a drink. I recognized her instantly, not because I'd seen her before, but because I'd already seen her everywhere. The angle of her wrist, the way she tilted her head. She glanced at Grant, then at me, and her mouth curved like she knew exactly who I was. That was when something inside me went cold and clear. "You invited her," I said. Grant exhaled through his nose, irritation flashing across his face before he caught it. "Don't do this." The woman turned fully toward us. She smiled, bright and unbothered. "Grant, aren't you going to introduce me?" People nearby slowed. You can feel it when a room shifts. Not silence, not drama, just attention leaning in. "This is my wife," Grant said too quickly. Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, hi." I looked at her. "How long?" She glanced at him, then back at me. "He told me you were separated." Grant's jaw tightened. "That's enough." I opened the muted thread and scrolled to the message with the hotel screenshot. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You booked this for next week," I said, showing it to him. "The same week you told me you'd be in Atlanta for work." A man from Grant's firm stood a few feet away, frozen mid-sip. Someone else laughed nervously, then stopped when they realized this wasn't entertainment. Grant reached for my wrist. I stepped back. "Kira, please," he said. "You're misreading things." I looked at him, the man I'd shared a house with, a child with, years of quiet labor and invisible support. And I understood something with absolute certainty. He wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of losing control of the story. "You planned this," I said. "You planned me." The woman shifted her weight. "I didn't know—" I cut my eyes to her. "You knew enough." Grant straightened, trying to reclaim the moment. "Let's leave," he said, firm now, like he was issuing an order. "No," I said. "I am." He laughed under his breath, a sound meant to shrink me. "Don't make a scene." I met his gaze. You already did. I handed him the phone. I won't be explaining anything for you. Not tonight, not ever. Around us, people pretended not to listen while listening to every word. This city doesn't forget. It files things away. Grant followed me toward the exit. You're overreacting, he said, low and urgent. Think about what you're risking. I stopped at the door and turned. I already did. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he didn't know which version of me he was dealing with. I walked out into the night alone. The river air hit me like a reset. My hands were steady now. My chest hurt, but it wasn't panic. It was resolve settling into place. I didn't cry on the steps. I didn't look back. I pulled my car door shut and sat there for a moment, breathing, letting the humiliation burn clean instead of turning inward. He thought I wouldn't see it coming. He was wrong. As I drove away from the lights and the laughter and the life he thought he was entitled to keep, I made myself a promise I would not break. I was done being managed, and whatever came next, I would be ready. Grant and I didn't start like this. That's the part people never understand when they ask later how I missed the signs. We weren't reckless. We weren't dramatic. We built things slowly, deliberately, like people who believed stability was a virtue. When we met, I was the practical one. He liked to say I grounded him. I handled logistics, planning, the invisible work that makes a life run smoothly. He had ambition. I had follow-through. Together, it worked. Or at least it looked like it did. We married young enough to grow into each other and old enough to think we knew better than everyone else. I took fewer risks, so he could take bigger ones. When his career stalled early on, I stayed steady. When he wanted to move for opportunity, I agreed. When we had our daughter, I recalibrated everything, my hours, my expectations, my sense of self, without keeping score. That was my mistake. Not trusting him, not loving him, believing sacrifice was neutral, that it didn't tilt the balance. The money came gradually. Not sudden wealth, but comfort. A house with equity. Retirement accounts that grew quietly. Joint savings we rarely touched. On paper, we were responsible adults doing things the right way. What wasn't on paper was how often I stepped back so he could step forward. There were signs. I see them now because hindsight has no mercy. The phone face down on the counter. The new passwords. The way he suddenly spoke in summaries instead of details. It's boring work stuff, he'd say. You wouldn't care. He started correcting me in public. Small things, harmless things. Like my memory was unreliable. He laughed more when I wasn't in the room. He dressed differently. More careful. Less for me. I noticed. I just didn't name it. What I didn't know was that while I was protecting the structure of our life, he was studying it, learning where the load-bearing walls were, learning what I handled so he didn't have to, learning how much I trusted him to be decent. The messages on his phone didn't just expose an affair. They exposed a plan. Paperwork wasn't romantic. It was strategic. Discussions about timing, optics, how to make changes without a fight. Comments about how I'd stay calm and avoid drama. He knew my values and was using them against me. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. There was also something else buried in those messages that tightened my throat when I saw it. References to money I didn't know he was touching. Conversations about credit, about moving things slowly, about me not noticing until it was too late to argue. That was when fear sharpened into focus. We had a daughter, a child who believed her home was permanent, who believed her parents were a unit, who believed, because I had taught her to, that adults meant what they said. I drove home that night replaying moments I'd brushed off. The business trip that didn't add up, the dinner he skipped because he was exhausted, the way he'd insisted we put certain assets in his name for convenience. I had agreed because I trusted him not to be someone who would take advantage of trust. I slept maybe an hour. In the morning, I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions that would warn him. I watched. I listened. I pulled bank statements and felt my stomach drop as patterns emerged. Nothing illegal yet. Nothing loud. Just movement. By noon, I called my closest friend, Mara. She'd known us since before the marriage. She didn't interrupt when I told her everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Kira," she said carefully. "I've seen her." My chest tightened. "Seen who?" "The woman. A few times. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but—" She stopped. "I saw them together last month, holding hands. He didn't look worried." That was the confirmation. Not suspicion, not interpretation. Proof that my silence had been mistaken for blindness. That afternoon, my daughter came home from school quieter than usual. She dropped her backpack by the door and asked, "Are you and Dad mad at each other?" "No," I said automatically. She studied my face the way children do when they're deciding whether to believe you. "Dad's been acting weird," she said. "He keeps texting when we're talking." I went into the bathroom and locked the door before the sound could escape me. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about protection. About preventing a future where my child watched me scramble while he walked away clean. About stopping a story from being written where I was the obstacle instead of the foundation. By that night, the shock had settled into something colder. Something organized. Grant thought he could rearrange our life quietly. Thought my calm meant compliance. Thought I wouldn't act until it was too late. He didn't know that the moment I understood the stakes, the marriage I thought I was preserving no longer existed. What existed now was a line, and once crossed, I would not step back. I didn't confront Grant the next morning. I didn't slam doors or demand explanations. I moved like someone who finally understood the rules of the game. Shock is loud. Strategy is quiet. I waited until he left for work. I listened to his car pull out of the driveway. Then I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and treated my own life like a project that had gone off the rails and needed to be stabilized. Fast. First, I secured proof. I backed up everything from his phone that I'd screenshotted the night before. Messages, dates, the hotel confirmation. The phrases that mattered. The ones that showed intent, not emotion. I uploaded copies to 2 separate cloud accounts and emailed them to myself under a subject line that wouldn't raise alarms. I wasn't angry while I did it. I was methodical. Next came the money. I logged into our joint accounts and reviewed every line item. I printed statements. I flagged transfers that didn't make sense. I opened a new account in my name only and moved exactly what I was legally allowed to move. Nothing reckless, nothing dramatic. Just enough to ensure I wouldn't wake up locked out of my own life. I froze our shared credit cards with a single phone call. Temporary, I told the representative. Calm. Polite. Final. Then I called a lawyer. I didn't pick the flashiest firm. I picked the one that asked the right questions. When she asked why I was calling, I said, "My husband is preparing to leave, and I need to protect my child and my assets." I didn't say affair. I didn't say heartbreak. I said facts. She listened. She told me what not to do. She told me what to document. She told me how people like Grant usually behaved once they realized control was slipping. "You're ahead of him," she said at the end. "Don't warn him." I hung up and packed. Not everything, just the things that mattered. Documents, jewelry with history, my grandmother's watch, my daughter's birth certificate, the external hard drive Grant never touched because he didn't understand tech. I put them in the trunk of my car and drove them to Mara's house without telling anyone where I was going. When I came back, the house felt different. Not empty, neutral, like a place that no longer belonged to both of us. Grant texted around noon. "Everything okay? You left early." I didn't respond. By afternoon, I'd contacted a realtor. I didn't list the house, not yet. I asked questions. I learned timelines. I learned leverage. I picked my daughter up from school and made dinner like any other night. I helped with homework. I asked about her day. I didn't poison her against her father. I didn't let her see fear. I let her see consistency. Grant came home late. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and stopped when he saw the credit card notification on his phone. I watched the moment land. The pause. The recalculation. "What did you do?" he asked. I kept stirring the pot. "I made adjustments." "You froze the cards," he said, disbelief bleeding into irritation. "You can't do that." "I can," I said, "and I did." He laughed, sharp and short. "You're being dramatic." That was when I finally looked at him. "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." He stepped closer. "You think you can just, what, take over? Lock me out?" I turned off the stove. "I think you underestimated me." His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," he said. I met his eyes. That's the point. For the first time since the night at the benefit, I saw it clearly on his face. Shock, not regret, not guilt. Shock that the version of me he'd planned around no longer existed, and that whatever he thought he was walking into next, I was already 3 steps ahead. The first thing Grant lost wasn't money. It was rhythm. He'd built his life on smooth access, accounts that worked, cards that cleared, a wife who handled the dull details without complaint. When that system stalled, everything else started to creak. The calls began the next morning. He didn't start angry. He started confused. "Kira, something's wrong with the account," he said, trying to sound casual. "It's probably a glitch." "It's not," I replied. There was a pause. "You can't just do this without talking to me." "We've talked enough," I said, and ended the call. By lunchtime, the confusion had sharpened. He texted screenshots of declined charges, gas, lunch, small things that suddenly mattered. I didn't respond. I forwarded them to my lawyer. By afternoon, the anger arrived. He showed up at the house unannounced, pacing the living room like it still belonged to him. "You're trying to punish me?" he said. "This is vindictive." I stayed seated. "This is preventative," he scoffed. "You think freezing a card changes anything?" "It already has," I said. What he didn't know was that his comfort had been subsidized by my quiet competence. Bills auto-paid, deadlines remembered, details tracked. Without that, he started missing things. His firm noticed first. A payment he'd promised a vendor bounced. Not catastrophically, but enough to raise an eyebrow. A lunch he'd scheduled to smooth things over got awkward when he had to ask someone else to cover the check. These were small humiliations, but they stacked. The mistress felt it next. She didn't call me. She called him. I know because he shouted her name in the driveway when he took the call outside, his voice tight and low. "I told you to wait," he hissed. "This isn't the time." She wanted reassurance. She wanted the future he'd implied was imminent. What she got instead was a man suddenly preoccupied with logistics and damage control. Savannah doesn't need announcements. It runs on observation. People noticed I wasn't at his side. They noticed he arrived alone. They noticed the woman who had once been discreet was suddenly absent too. A few reached out to me, not with questions, but with statements. "I saw you leave the other night. You okay? If you need anything." Sides were forming without my participation. Grant's family called, not to scold him, to ask me what was going on. I didn't embellish. I didn't vent. I said, "Grant and I are separating. I'm handling it privately." That restraint did more damage than any accusation could have. It forced people to fill in the blanks themselves. The first real consequence landed 2 days later. Grant tried to access a secondary account I hadn't known about before, one he'd mentioned casually in a message, assuming I wouldn't connect it to reality. The bank flagged it because of recent changes. They froze it pending review. He stormed into the house that night, eyes wild. "Did you do this?" "No," I said truthfully. "You did." He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "You're ruining my life," he said. I stood up then. "You built this life on my stability. I'm just no longer providing it." His phone buzzed again. This time he answered in front of me. "I can't talk right now," he snapped. "No." Because everything's falling apart. I didn't need to hear the other side to know what was happening. The fantasy was cracking. She wasn't getting a knight in shining armor. She was getting a man scrambling to keep his footing. The social circle reacted next. An invitation to a weekend gathering arrived. For me only. A mutual friend texted. I didn't know whether to include him. I thanked her and declined. Absence spoke louder than presence. Grant noticed. People are freezing me out, he said one night, incredulous. You said something. I didn't have to, I replied. He started calling more, leaving voicemails that shifted tone hourly, pleading, angry, confused, apologetic. Promises slipped in between accusations. We can fix this. You're overreacting. Think about our daughter. I listened to none of them. The final consequence of that first week was silence. I blocked his number after forwarding everything to my lawyer. I blocked him on social media. I shut down the channels he used to test my resolve. The last message came through before the block fully set. Please, just talk to me. I didn't reply. For the first time since he'd started planning his exit, Grant didn't know where I was or what I was doing. And that uncertainty, raw, unfamiliar, and deserved, was the moment he finally understood something had gone very wrong. Grant didn't plan the second confrontation to be public. That's what made it worse. He framed it as a family dinner, neutral ground, familiar faces, a chance to clear misunderstandings. His parents were in town. His sister had flown in. A restaurant on the edge of the historic district, upscale enough to signal seriousness, quiet enough for control. He texted through his mother, not me. That alone told me he thought he could stage manage the outcome. I agreed to come. Not because I wanted closure, because I understood timing. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. They were already seated. Grant stood when he saw me, relief flashing across his face like he'd won something. His mother reached for my hand. His father nodded stiffly. His sister avoided my eyes. And then I saw her. She wasn't supposed to be there. I knew that instantly. She was sitting 2 seats away from Grant, posture tight, smile strained, dressed carefully enough to look unaccidental. She looked like someone who'd been told this was temporary, that she just needed to be patient. Grant's face drained when he realized I'd noticed. Kira, he started. I didn't sit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I looked at his mother first. I didn't know this was a group discussion. Her brow furrowed. Grant said, I know what Grant says, I replied gently. Then I turned to him. You asked for a conversation. This isn't one. He gestured helplessly. She just wanted to explain. The woman straightened. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said quickly. I was told the marriage was already... I finally looked at her. Really looked. He told you that because it made you useful, I said. Not because it was true. Grant slammed his hand lightly on the table. Enough. The word hung there. A reflex. An old habit. I smiled then. Not warmly. Clearly. You don't get to moderate anymore, I said. The table had gone still. Nearby diners pretended not to listen. They were listening. I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table, not toward Grant, but toward his parents. Before this turns into a performance, I said, I want you to understand why I won't be participating. I tapped the screen once. The hotel confirmation filled the display. Then a thread of messages, names cropped, dates intact. Grant went pale. His mother leaned closer, lips parting. What is this? Planning, I said. Not an affair. Planning. His sister inhaled sharply. Grant, you said... I said what I needed to, he snapped, then caught himself. Too late. The woman beside him shifted back in her chair. You told me she knew. I didn't look at Grant this time. I looked at her. If I knew, you wouldn't be here. That was the moment it broke. Her composure cracked, just enough. You told me she was unstable, she said to him, voice shaking. You said she'd make things ugly. Grant stared at her. stop talking. I picked up my phone. This is the part where I leave, I said. Because whatever story you plan to sell tonight isn't mine to finish. His father stood abruptly. Grant, he said, low and furious. Is this true? Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I turned to his mother. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said. I'm asking you to respect mine. She nodded once slowly. I understand. The woman pushed her chair back. I can't do this, she said, standing. I didn't sign up to be humiliated. I met her eyes as she passed me. Neither did I. She didn't look back. Grant finally found his voice. You're enjoying this, he said, desperate now. You're trying to ruin me. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me clearly. I'm not ruining you, I said. I'm stepping out of your way. Then I said it. Quiet, precise, impossible to misunderstand. You didn't lose me when you cheated, I told him. You lost me when you planned to leave me empty-handed and hoped I'd stay polite. I picked up my bag. As I walked out, I heard his father say his name again, this time with disappointment instead of protection. Outside, the night air felt lighter, cleaner. By the next morning, that one sentence was everywhere. Repeated, paraphrased, carried from table to table, mouth to mouth. Grant had wanted control of the narrative. Instead, he'd handed it to the room. Grant tried to move faster than the truth. The morning after the restaurant, he went quiet online. No posts, no check-ins, no charm. By evening, a version of the story began circulating anyway. Not from him directly, from people who wanted to be helpful, from acquaintances who said things like, it's complicated and they were already having issues. Softening language meant to blur edges. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't need to. Because Grant made one mistake he'd never made before. He panicked. 2 days later, he posted a statement. Carefully worded, emotionally vague, full of phrases that sounded mature and meant nothing. He talked about privacy, about shared responsibility, about how public speculation was damaging to our family. He never denied the affair. He just reframed it. That was enough. Within an hour, the questions started. Not loud accusations, quiet ones. Screenshots of his words dropped into group chats with a single line underneath. So what actually happened? By noon, someone sent me the post with a note. You don't have to respond. But if you do? I waited until evening. Then I responded, not with commentary, not with emotion, but with documentation. I didn't name names. I didn't add context. I posted 3 images and 1 sentence. The hotel confirmation, the time-stamped messages, the phrase he thought would never leave his phone. She'll never see it coming. This is what planning looks like. I turned off notifications. The reaction wasn't explosive. It was surgical. People don't like being lied to when they've already chosen patience. His post had asked for grace. My response explained why it wasn't deserved. The comments shifted tone within minutes. The language changed. People stopped hedging. They stopped saying both sides. They started asking him directly to explain specifics he couldn't. Grant deleted the post. It was too late. Screenshots travel faster than regret. Someone made a thread compiling timelines. Someone else shared a screenshot of him at the benefit with the caption bold. A former colleague quietly removed his endorsement from Grant's professional page. An event he was scheduled to speak at updated their website. His name disappeared without announcement. The hashtag came next. Not malicious. Accurate. It wasn't my idea. I didn't amplify it. I just watched it spread like a label people had been waiting for. Grant called from a blocked number that night. I didn't answer. He emailed. Apologetic this time. Said he'd made mistakes. Said he was being attacked unfairly. Said he needed me to help calm things down. For our daughter. I forwarded it to my lawyer. The mistress tried to salvage herself. She posted a statement distancing herself, claimed ignorance, claimed manipulation, claimed she'd been misled. The problem was that her own messages, ones she'd sent him, were now being shared too. Not by me, by people who'd received them when she was still confident. The narrative collapsed under its own weight. Grant's firm released a bland internal note about conduct under review. Not an accusation, a pause. That pause was enough to stall deals and sour trust. He was removed from client-facing responsibilities, temporarily. His access badge stopped working the following Monday. He showed up at the house that night anyway. He looked smaller, rumpled, like someone who hadn't slept. "You could have stopped this," he said, voice raw. "You could have handled it privately." "I did," I replied through the door. "You made it public when you lied. You're letting them destroy me." I rested my forehead against the door, not out of weakness, but to keep my voice steady. "No," I said. "I'm letting them see you." He slid down the wall on the other side. "I don't recognize my life." "I don't recognize you," I said. By the end of the week, Grant's credibility was gone. Not erased. Exposed. He couldn't speak without someone checking receipts. He couldn't promise without someone remembering a screenshot. The story he tried to spin unraveled completely. And for the first time since I'd picked up his phone that night, the power dynamic flipped in a way even he couldn't deny. He wasn't controlling the fallout anymore. He was surviving it. The collapse didn't come all at once. It came in increments, formal, documented, and irreversible. Once the narrative shifted, the legal process accelerated. Not because I rushed it, but because Grant lost the advantage he'd been quietly counting on: credibility. Judges, attorneys, mediators. They don't reward chaos. They reward consistency. And I had it. The forensic accountant's report landed first. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. Clean tables, clear dates. A slow siphoning of joint funds into accounts Grant hadn't disclosed. Nothing criminal enough to excuse, but enough to prove intent. Enough to dismantle any argument that I was overreacting. Grant's attorney tried to reframe it as poor communication. Mine slid the documentation across the table and waited. The house was next. We didn't argue over it. We didn't need to. The equity was obvious. The timeline was documented. The decision to list came with conditions Grant didn't expect. Conditions that protected stability for our daughter and removed his ability to stall. He signed because he had no leverage left. Custody followed the same pattern. I didn't ask for revenge custody. I asked for routine, school continuity, medical authority. A schedule that reflected who had actually been present. Grant pushed back until his own messages, sent during nights he claimed to be with family, were introduced. His objection dissolved. The settlement finalized faster than anyone predicted. Grant walked away with less than he'd planned for and more restrictions than he'd imagined. Accounts he thought were untouchable were audited. Access he assumed was permanent became conditional. His lifestyle adjusted downward, quickly. The family fallout was quieter, but sharper. His father called me the night the settlement was signed. "I raised him better than this," he said. "I won't defend what I can't respect." Financial support Grant had relied on, soft loans, introductions, quiet backstopping, ended that night. His sister stopped returning his calls. Not out of cruelty, out of exhaustion. His mother tried to mediate once. I declined. Not angrily, permanently. The mistress unraveled in parallel. Her job placed her on administrative leave after clients raised concerns about professional judgment. Friends distanced themselves. The confidence she'd worn so easily vanished when she realized Grant couldn't protect her anymore, and never had been able to. She sent me one message. I didn't think it would end like this. I didn't respond. By winter, Grant no longer lived in the house. He rented a small place outside the city. His car changed. His calendar emptied. Invitations stopped arriving. Our daughter noticed, but not in the way he feared. She noticed peace. She noticed dinners without tension, mornings without whispered arguments. She noticed that promises were kept again, that schedules were predictable, that her home felt solid. One night she said quietly, "You don't look tired anymore." That was the final metric. Grant tried once more to appeal to nostalgia. A letter. Apologies written too late to matter. He asked for another chance to be a family. I filed it with the rest of the paperwork. The fallout didn't destroy him. It clarified him, stripped away the cushioning he'd mistaken for character. And when the legal process closed, when the assets were divided and the future was secured, one truth remained untouched. Everything he lost, he'd already spent. I was just the one who stopped covering the bill. The last time Grant asked to see me, he didn't frame it as reconciliation. He framed it as necessity. His message was careful, stripped of emotion, written the way people write when they know they've lost leverage. We need to talk about closure. He suggested a public place, daytime, neutral. He wanted witnesses without saying so, protection without admitting fear. I agreed, not because I owed him anything, because I was done carrying unfinished weight. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind people use for meetings they don't want overheard. He was already there when I arrived, seated with his back to the wall, eyes scanning the door like habit had replaced confidence. He stood when he saw me, then hesitated, unsure whether standing was still expected. I didn't hug him. I didn't sit right away. "You have 10 minutes, I said. He nodded, swallowing. "Thank you." That word, thank you, used to mean partnership. Now it meant survival. He looked older, not aged by time but by collapse. His clothes were clean but wrong, chosen without instinct. His hands moved too much, then not at all. He was trying to hold himself together using tools that no longer worked. "I know I don't deserve this," he began. I sat down. "Start with facts." He flinched, then adjusted. "I made choices that hurt you. I panicked. I lied. I thought I could manage everything without blowing up our lives." "You thought I'd stay manageable," I said. His mouth opened, then closed. He nodded once. Yes. There it was. The honesty he'd avoided until it cost him everything. "I never meant to hurt our daughter," he said quickly. "I never meant for things to spiral like this." "You didn't plan for consequences," I said. "That's not the same thing." He leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to undo anything. I know that's done. I need to understand how we got here." I watched him for a moment. Really watched him. The man who used to fill rooms now folded into himself, trying to extract meaning from damage like it was currency. "You didn't lose me all at once," I said. "You lost me in pieces. Every time you chose convenience over truth. Every time you made a decision assuming I wouldn't push back." "I was scared," he said. "Of change. Of failing. You were scared of being seen," I replied. "There's a difference." His eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. "I still love you." I didn't react. I let the words sit there, unreturned. "Love isn't what you did," I said. "Love isn't planning exits and hoping the other person stays polite." He pressed his fingers together, knuckles whitening. "I've lost everything." "No," I said calmly. "You lost control. That's what you're feeling." He looked up sharply. "You still have your life," I continued. "You're breathing. You're working. You get to rebuild. What you don't have anymore is access to me as a stabilizer." He shook his head. "You don't understand what it's been like." I tilted my head slightly. "I understand perfectly. I just no longer confuse understanding with responsibility." Silence stretched between us, heavy but clean. "I miss our family," he said finally. "The way it used to be." "So do I said. But that version ended before I knew it was over. He reached across the table, then stopped himself, hand hovering uselessly in the air. "Is there really no way back?" I held his gaze, steady and unsoftened. "There's no version of me that survives going backward." Something in his face collapsed then. Not anger, not grief, but realization. The kind that arrives too late to negotiate with. "I would do things differently," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it tragic, not redeemable." He laughed weakly. "You always did know how to say things that cut." "I'm not cutting you," I said. I'm cutting myself free. He nodded slowly, absorbing that. I just wanted one more chance to explain, he said. You've been explaining for months, I answered. What you never did was listen. The server came by with the check. I reached for my bag. I'll pay, Grant said automatically. I stopped him with a look. No? I placed my card down. Not as a statement, as a boundary. When I stood, he stood too, uncertain again. What do I tell people? He asked quietly. When they ask why we didn't make it, I considered that. Then I gave him the truth, clean and final. Tell them you planned a life without me, I said, and I refused to live in it. He closed his eyes. I walked toward the door without waiting to see if he followed. I didn't look back this time either. Not because it hurt too much, but because it didn't hurt at all. Outside, the air was crisp, ordinary. The world hadn't changed. I had. A year passed without ceremony. No dramatic milestones, no victory laps. Just days stacking quietly into a life that finally felt aligned with itself. We moved into a smaller house with better light. Not because I had to downsize, but because I wanted space that belonged to us without echoes. I painted the kitchen a color Grant would have hated. I planted herbs by the window and actually used them. The house didn't feel temporary. It felt intentional. My daughter adjusted faster than I expected. Children know when tension leaves before adults admit it. She slept better, laughed louder. She stopped asking questions designed to measure my mood. She started inviting friends over again. One night, while we were folding laundry together, she said, "It feels calmer here." I nodded. It is. She didn't ask about her father much. When she did, I answered honestly without poison. I didn't rewrite history for her. I just didn't make it heavier than it needed to be. She deserved her own understanding, not my resentment. Work changed, too. I took on a leadership role I'd been circling for years but never stepped into because someone else's ambitions always came first. Turns out, I was more capable than I'd been told. People noticed. Opportunities followed. Not flashy. Solid. There's a particular kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can survive what you once feared. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in your posture, in how you speak, in what you no longer explain. Grant faded from my daily life in predictable stages. First, his messages slowed. Then they stopped altogether. I heard things through distance. He'd moved again, changed jobs, lost another one. People stopped updating me. He became background noise, then silence. Once, months later, I saw him across a parking lot. He looked thinner, uncertain, like someone who hadn't quite rebuilt the scaffolding around himself. He didn't see me. I didn't feel anything sharp. Just clarity. That surprised me most of all. I had imagined freedom would feel loud, triumphant, like vindication. Instead, it felt steady, clean, ordinary in the best way. I stopped bracing for the next betrayal, stopped rehearsing explanations, stopped questioning whether I'd been too much or not enough. Betrayal has a way of tricking you into believing it's a referendum on your worth. It isn't. It's a confession. Grant confessed who he was long before I believed him. I just finally listened. On quiet nights, after my daughter goes to bed, I sit on the porch and let the silence settle without filling it. I don't miss the chaos I once mistook for intimacy. I don't miss negotiating my own stability for someone else's comfort. I miss the woman I used to be sometimes. The one who believed loyalty would be returned simply because it was given freely. But I don't mourn her. She got me here. Betrayal didn't destroy my life. It clarified it. It showed me exactly where I'd been shrinking to keep a story intact. It taught me the cost of staying polite when something is already breaking. It gave me permission to choose myself without apology. Grant once thought I wouldn't see it coming. He was wrong about that. But he was right about one thing, even if he never meant it this way. I didn't see this version of my life coming either, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Before you go, thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it resonated with you, Tap the hype button and let it know you felt it too. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, or your own experience, in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you hit subscribe and like so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next